Hello, Julie. How are you?
Ah, I'm doing fairly well, thank you. How about yourself?
Very well. On a nice rainy New England day.
Yeah. So we're going to continue on in our dialogue with one another. And first of all, I want to thank you for two things. One is for being available for doing this with me. And I think it's very useful for our relationship and our process um, in human and spiritual and transcendental terms in relationship to the divine process and Adidam. And then also to thank you so much for all of what you do on Beezone. I'm really grateful for all of the long time work that you've been doing. And whenever you send me something new, it always seems to be synchronous and correspond to something very pertinent to the process itself.
Hmm.
And I would imagine, because I know you're not thinking about me, when you're doing these posts, but that because it feels synchronous with me, um, I imagine that there would be something somewhat similar with others, but perhaps they're receiving or viewing or participating in what you're putting out there in a way that relates to their own divine process and their own practice. So I appreciate that. Mm.
Well, what you're sharing with me, and I'm not ignorant of these kinds of connections that you're referring to, and especially when we're as connected as we are in other areas of life and what we've been doing together. What you're telling me is not uncommon, but people who I am in relationship with Adida in the same manner that we are. And in the past, that is a very, very, um, I won't say just say common, but I would say extraordinary confession that the link up in the M field, if you will, or the field that we are connected in is synchronistic. So I'm not planning on sending things to you. I come
Mm.
upon them as they
Mm.
appear to me, and I
Mm.
feel you in your enjoyment or understanding of
Mm.
those items, and you're one of the few. And sometimes
Mm.
you're the only one that I think can hear or see or appreciate what it is that I'm sending. And so it's not, it doesn't go unnoticed what you're telling
Mm.
me.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, this would be synchronous with my understanding of the process with Arida, in the sense that it's an eternal conversation. And when he refers to that, he is referring to the context or the source condition in which our relationship is arising. And the direct relationship with him then is active in that regard. And this also occurs with other devotees in my relationship with them. And
Right.
the most interesting part of it is that it's all linked. Like, it may be a different aspect of their life or our life or a different aspect of the teaching, but the process itself is synchronous. I feel it's what Adida describes as the superphysics of the relationship.
And
And
and and and the traditions, it's the synchronicity of Carl Jung. It's the synchronicity of of other people, well, whether it be Sheldrake or other people. It's just an
mm,
active field, and when you become aware of that, um,
yeah,
and some people just call it psychic or whatever. Uh, I like the M field of Sheldrake's definition of it to say
sure,
it's
sure.
beyond time and space.
Yeah, yes, yes. So we're speaking about a truth.
Right, right. I was
Yes,
just
yeah.
thinking of the quality, but I hear you. I hear you.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Meaning a truth that is pointed to or directly experienced or come to be known or understood throughout the divine process that encompasses all the great traditions, um, whether they are, about shamans or yogis or saints or sages, and the manner in which that realization or understanding has come to be known through the traditions.
Right.
And then Adidam's unique revelation of it in relationship to it. So what I wanted to talk with you about is, this is a good segue actually to what I wanted to ask you about, to hear you speak about your life and your process in relationship to this matter. So there's I'm going to be referring to notes. That's why I'm looking down. Okay. So based on a writing that you penned or paraphrased in relationship to, I think it's probably your own process, but then also Adidam's words. I will read that. It's because it's brief. I'll read that right now and then ask you the question about it.
Right.
So you indicate that in this writing, because I had asked you if this was your own writing, and then you replied somewhat, but it was it was based upon your study of the spiritual stages of life, entering into a spiritualized stage of practice, and then you put in parentheses, which I thought was great, unmediated without substances.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. And then I'll read it. Once the individual passes through the crisis of ego death and the knot in the navel is severed, the heart breaks open. Then the beginning of the fourth stage of life begins. Energy is felt to be centered in the region of the middle chest. The life energy is no longer associated with the left side of the heart and the downward current. The current of life is reversed. The revulsion of life energy needing to be thrown out has turned. Breathing comes in and out of the heart region, and the navel is expanded. Breathing falls naturally into the navel. The belly has dropped. The navel is expanded with life energy. The contraction or knot in the navel is gone. One is aware and awake from the heart. The feeling center of being is the middle heart. Feeling is awakened and the mummery of life is awakened. The play of life is just that, a play. Life is no longer a serious affair. Humor is awakened and laughter is alive. Every moment is a moment of unfolding possibilities without the crunch of death pressing in. This stage of life is the beginning of the subtle, astral, or higher mind. The mind continues as it did before, only in the context of the open heart. Feeling is awakened and is not the origin of one's life. The horror of this is the madness of life, of what others are doing. The unity of what one feels at this stage is alive, and the need for strife, struggle, and the fight for survival is ended. One is alive and is lived. The breathing is happening, and the mind is running. The witness is alive. In some cases, the mind is blank. Nothing is happening anymore. The content of images and visions is gone. One closes one's eyes and there is nothing there. It's a blank, black screen. Breathing is alive and feeling is pulsating. Thoughts continue and are witnessed. Freedom is apparent. You're home. And the paradox is awakened, not just philosophically, but actually in every moment. Human demands of life are exactly the same. The only difference is one's relationship to them. The mystery is awakened and the responsibility to submit to that which is constant and alive. This is the beginning of spiritual life. So that's a lot. That encompasses a lot.
Right.
So I asked you, and I sent this to you in a question form. So this is brief and I'll read it to you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So based on what you wrote there, did you feel that what Adidam describes in Bright Song as ego death was occurring when you had the experience of the knot in the navel not being the place from which you lived? That's something that we discussed earlier about your own life, which was a very significant transition for you.
Mhm.
But you indicated that you lived from the heart position.
Right.
That's where you are located. So was that your understanding at that time relative
Oh,
to?
no, the experience happened. It is only after many years of investigating, trying to understand what had occurred.
Okay.
And then, of course, Adidam's illuminating wisdom on this specific issue of the vital shock, as he spoke to me when he in the method of the siddhis. And of all of my study up to that point,
Right.
I was trying to, I could understand the loss of ego with Alan Watts in the book, in the taboo of knowing who you are, because that's one of the first pieces of literature that came across my desk, if you will, that spoke to this phenomenon that occurred for me. But now I have to say, I had no background, zero background on any of the spiritual literature, religious literature, or even philosophical literature. I was completely ignorant in any understanding of what had occurred.
Okay.
But so I had no sense of things. And the only thing I felt was, if this phenomenon had freed me from my previous understanding of who I was, why were things continuing to arise as they were previously? As if nothing had changed. But in another sense, everything had changed. My whole relationship to not only my body and my feeling, but the world. It became a kind of, as he points out, the mummery, the play, the game, the unseriousness of life in a threatening manner. Now, the responsibility is still held, and that was just beginning for me, because I had not engaged life in any way. I think I was a sophomore in college at that time. It's 1970 or 71. Right. So I had zero understanding. And so only from that moment that I started to say, well, I better start looking for something of understanding of that. And the first one that really spoke to me was Watts's book, The Book, Does It Matter? Which of course then got me into Alan Watts, then also got me into eventually a lot of different authors and writers, but Buddhism and D2 Suzuki and the Lankarva Sutra and all of that other stuff. So that was the initial impetus for me to understand what was happening.
Right.
And trying to get a sense of what was. And so when I came across the method of the siddhis, and he spoke of vital shock, because that was the primary difference in bodily terms, that I was no longer, I didn't feel my stomach had ballooned. And so I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand that. But when he spoke to that, that was my real interest in going further into Adidam and his teaching on vital shock, the self-contraction, and the whole thing. So I was trying to conform it to the three poisons in Buddhism, I was trying to conform his teaching to what I was understanding on the wheel of life and the 12 chains of causation and the 3 poisons, all of that stuff. And it really was kind of working, but Adidam has spoke so clearly of this, and it was really the foundation, my doorway into his work. And I followed that because I thought that was a primary and crucial understanding.
Yeah.
But then whenever I looked through his literature, that was the main shaft that I was going for, is the vital shock. And I that was I wanted to understand everything. And over the years, and now it's been, I don't know, 30, 40 years, I have kind of summarized through his teaching, through my understanding, the Dornhorst Testament, and I have come up with and I posted it on the Beezone, and I can verify it within the Dornhorst Testament. I can verify with his word. I can point to his teachings that definitely says the release of the vital shock is the entrance into the 4th stage of life. And I've done so much work on that. So that was my doorway to understand. Not that I'm saying I'm in the 4th stage of life, and I don't want to put anything on that. I'm just saying my understanding of that is this is what I have come up with my understanding to explain what happened for me. But I still, I don't even understand. I don't even try. I mean, I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of study. I do a lot of stuff. The whole point is that you're not trying to figure things out anymore as much as you're following a current. You're following signs and energies, and it's no longer got to deal with. I drank ayahuasca for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, hundreds of times with South American shamans. Yeah. And I could go through this open, and I would travel. But it still wasn't it. I could still find myself in realms upon realms of people with entrance of shamans and teachings and things of that sort. It wasn't like, okay, I'm now able to do these kinds of astral travels or subtle travel. Because fundamentally, you saw that there was no place to go. You were always in that present state. No matter what arose, where you went, what you did, it was the same over and over again. You were in a position to be responsible for whatever was appearing in the mind or the body or in life. It was just self-evident. There was no place to go. And whatever occurred.
That just reminds me of when you often will say the light is always on.
Right. And you even when you're sleeping or there's no away. It's just whatever is arising. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's difficult, and that's where the purification is always understood, that you just have to endure, not suffer. But you get a sense that there's this purifying process that you're involved with now, way beyond your understanding, way beyond what you could even get a glimpse of, because now you're way beyond your depth, or in the sense of knowledge.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So beautiful. There's a couple things that immediately come to attention in terms of wanting to ask you about, and that is that I'm remembering, obviously, the numerous times I have heard Beloved directly speak about this matter of the manner in which the process works. And in him speaking about his own life and the sadhana years and his own demonstration of the 7th way, as he would often say, that he did not understand fully what occurred spontaneously and priorly in relationship to the bride, being born in the bride and as the bride, that he would not fully comprehend or be able to initially cognize what happened. And so I'm hearing you describe a similar thing. So anything to say about that in particular, about your understanding of Beloved's revelation in that regard too?
Well, well, one is that he is so instructive for me in trying to well, because for me, I had to learn life, really. I mean, I was not even in life at all. Um, well, it confirms
Mm.
my feeling. It's not that I'm copying his
No,
feeling.
no, no. Yeah, and that's not what I'm pointing to at all. We maybe couldn't, as we know. His function is entirely unique in relationship to our process. And
Right.
But he does say, look, study my life. That is the primary principle form. Study my confession, study my life. The process itself will be exactly the same in
Right.
terms of how it is revealed. So, when I feel that confession is what is being described is the source condition, that is the bride, is always already the case. The
Right.
divine process itself is always already the case, even as the unmediated, the divine itself, that is the same source condition as everyone and everything, is as it is in every divine process, no matter how it manifests for each individual, although experientially it will be different according to, as we've spoken about so many times and as Beloved points to, relative to the seventh stage schema, it's different depending upon the psychobiography of the ego.
Right.
And then also what this reveals is that it's not a seeking process, because you're not cognizing it in advance such that you're making it happen by virtue of an effort or a method or a program or participation in some kind of a structural experience or even mapping of the manner in which life may arise and appear as it is cosmically or even universally, that is the same as the microcosm and the macrocosm and all the different ways that we could speak about the permutations. But that you're talking about you, as Adidam said in his awakening in the Vedanta temple, he began to live and breathe and notice that he was synchronous, that being itself, non-dual, the he and the she, the Atmanadi Shakti, is the condition from which he then lived. And noticing that his function began to become clear in the midst of that. Of course, we're not taking on the guru function, but we're noticing the process of the guru function being active in our life, even before we were aware of being able to name it.
Right.
Or to be able to identify the threshold personality. And there are many threshold personalities according to the stages of realization, or the samadhis, the divine samadhis that point to the source condition. So that's what I was referring to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Again, the superphysics of the transcendental spiritual oneness of everyone and everything. Therein you are lived and breathed. And so, when I hear you describe this process, this is what is significant. And this is what Adidam would say in the process of reality consideration with one another, and what he did with us and what he taught us. And I directly am absolutely certain of this, and have been perpetually established in this by the grace by divine grace, that this is how we are to consider the process with one another, so that we can locate the source. And then through the synchronicities and the spontaneous synchronicities that occur through our study, through our practice, through the meditation, through, taking care of ourselves and in terms of what's required to establish equanimity, the freeing of energy and attention through the release of the bondage that is attention when it's tied to the ego act itself. So in your process, in this instance, again, can you speak about your understanding of ego death then? Because in that quote that I read that you had posted on Beezone, that, and remembering what you spoke about in terms of the release from the navel, the severing of the vital shock, that after that time, as you have indicated previously, you weren't scot-free. I mean, there was still a process of adaptation and responsibility, right?
Big time. Big time. And not in real, it still required everything that anybody else would have had to done in the first 3 stages of life: relationship, money, job, sex, everything had to be adapted to. Everything had to be incorporated. I hadn't even developed in any way in those forms, so I had to adapt to life. I had to adapt first to education, and then relationship, and then money, and those elements. Those are just straight up things you had to do in a way that was harmonious and balanced as much as they could be received by others, and what you could deal with in your own manner. One thing that I noticed is that sometimes I was a little bit foolish in my, if you will, fearlessness, because fear was not operating as much in my way. And I would put myself in some what turned out to be dangerous physically and mentally, because remember I said I worked in mental institutions. I put myself in situations, and I always tended to do that because I saw how people could control other people through fear. I saw how fear operated. I began to see how fear operated in the world, and I saw how it limited people and how other people were controlling it, and how people were using it for excitement or bungee jumping or whatever, high-speed motor, just thrill seekers. I saw how fear was being used, but I also saw how fear was in the eyes and the hearts of most people. This is the fight, and then no, and then the cautiousness and the protection, and no, you don't do that, and you might offend him, and that put me into a lot of difficulty because I didn't have those same kinds of boundaries, so I had to develop boundaries socially, and being in places where you want to laugh your ass off about what's going on and the seriousness of things, because there's a lot of humor that goes with a little bit of freedom here. Like what's the problem here?
Right. Yeah.
Then you had to play, because the first thing I started to realize is that, and the only thing I spoke to, and I found myself getting in trouble, was the illusion of ego. I guess if there was anything that I kind of got, was that there was no ego.
Right.
In terms
of at the point when you began to understand this, had you come across Adidam's teaching in terms of his unique description of the ego?
Not at that time. In the beginning, it was only in the Buddhist sense.
Okay.
No ego. The 3 marks of being. And one of the
Yeah.
primary marks is no ego. So even in some of the teacher trainings that I was with, or Choyo Trumpa or these other people, that was said to be the fundamental understanding. There is no ego. Well, you can say that until the cows come home, but to live that and to be in situations where it would have to show itself in life that you weren't so, I wouldn't say, stupid about things, but you surely were not constrained by the limitations of fear that other people were being constrained by. Not that I was trying to be a race car driver or anything like that. I'm just saying in simple situations. So I took that on as an understanding in the beginning before I came into Adidam's understanding and teachings. So I took no ego and I started to speak in those terms in the Buddhist settings that I was involved with. And I saw that people could understand it to a point, but when it got to, I got caught in that understanding. I got caught in no ego. And I saw how that in itself was a trap, that anything that I started to understand and hold on to or get some conceptual understanding and start speaking about some kind of truth out there, I saw that was not going to work, and it wasn't. I was beginning to be an owner of this no ego kind of stuff. So I said, all of this brings you have yourself as a suspect, because you realize that you have no ground to grasp on. You have no knowledge, becomes a problem in itself, that you start to be a knower. And you get to see that if you start to claim or say anything, because the paradox is there is a little sense that you could be, oh goodness, I better watch myself here, because there's still those other parts of the psyche that are not purified. So the subtle ego and the causal ego, all that stuff, which I had no understanding of, was still operating at a level that I was not aware of, because I was still physically based and just becoming aware emotionally and on the lower mental and the higher middle centers of the brain. I didn't understand the subtle stuff, because I can see how then the subtle mind can create an identity of freedom here. So it really gets complicated. So, after a while, I just shut my mouth and just started to practice.